So let's start out by talking about what our plan for this workshop is. So, what are problematic sexual behaviors? Let's do some sexuality 101, so really a bit of sex ed, and then that'll lead into an exploration of your own sexual behavior problems, especially in the context of your own personal history. What we'll do is go over the underlying issues that tend to contribute to sexual behavior issues in most people. So occasionally, some of these particular topics may not be the most relevant to you. Not every module is going to apply, but you'll find that many of them have very practical implications for your life and can be generalized to other problems that you may be having in your life. So, welcome to the program. Let's talk about problematic sexual behaviors because sometimes what happens is what's a problem gets defined by religion, culture, perhaps the family that you were growing up in. And so what one person defines as a problem, the next person may not. So let's talk about what I'm calling sexual behavior problems. And so really I'm looking at people who are preoccupied with sex or it's being used inappropriately to cope in life. So how much time are you spending on sexual matters, whether it's looking at porn, whether it's masturbating too much, whether it's looking for partners. Sometimes people will come to these kinds of workshops, materials, therapy because of infidelity. And sometimes infidelity does reflect sexual behavior problems, but it can also reflect relationship problems or other kinds of really issues with partners and getting needs met generally. So sometimes infidelity is a sexual behavior problem, but sometimes it's also due to other relationship type issues. So let's then look at, if you think you've got some problems, have you tried to stop and have you had difficulty stopping those behaviors? Do you find that you're chasing the sexual dragon, so to speak? And do your sexual behaviors require that you need to lie to people? One of the most important things for me is really whether you've begun to use sex to cope with a variety of feelings. So, do you use sex to cope with depression, anger, sadness, resentment, to celebrate? Once sex becomes our primary way of coping with emotions, it can often be very challenging and very difficult for us to deal with. Obviously, can cross boundaries legally, where we talk about underage images, or contacting luring minors on the internet. Indeed, sometimes people's sexual behaviors will cause loss of job. They might be looking at sexual material online or leaving work to engage in affairs or other kinds of difficulties. Perhaps they're spending all their money on escorts, other kinds of sexual experiences, and sometimes just getting arrested, of course. So sometimes people want to get into a discussion about the terminology. So is this sex addiction? Is this sexual compulsion? What are the words that we're going to use here? And so really we're talking about all of these kinds of words: hypersexuality, obsessive, porn addiction, sexual impulsivity, sexaholic, sexually acting out. I don't actually care which terms you use. My preference is let's look at what the problem is and then try and find a way of fixing it. I don't really want to spend much time talking about the labels because I don't know that the labels are that important. More importantly, are your behaviors causing you difficulties and would you like to change these behaviors?